Good evening, here and in the Zoom. Tonight I'm going to be talking about one of the Dogen fascicles, one that we discussed last weekend in the Tao Ren study group that some of you attended. And I'm going to be talking about a little more from the theme of the spring Ango theme of creativity in Zen. So, Dogen Zenji wrote an essay. The title of that has been translated as 4 Methods of Bodhisattva Guidance. That's one translation of the characters, the Japanese or Chinese characters that he wrote. And just considering variations in this title can be a little bit instructive about this process of creativity, or how creativity emerges in literature and in our practice. So, for example, this title, 4 Methods of Bodhisattva Guidance. This implies that a bodhisattva is like giving direction, maybe in some way, or giving guidance, possibly through words, maybe guiding by example. I mean, that's one way of guidance that I've often heard praised. Lead by example, guide by example. But I found a number of alternate titles for this fascicle on the internet, and they kind of reveal how different translators see the same characters and interpret it differently. And this is sort of an access into creativity in our own practice. Can we see the same words at different times and have a different impression of them? That's some kind of way of getting a little deeper entry into the Dharma teachings. So, one of the titles was 4 ways, well, here's 2 of them. 4 ways for a bodhisattva to act, or another one, the 4 beneficial actions or practices of the bodhisattva. So these titles look more like action. It's like bodhisattvas are taking action for the sake of the other beings, in contrast to guidance. Another one is 4 elements of a bodhisattva's social relations. I thought, well, maybe that's translated by a sociologist or something. But it's about social relations, and a lot of the actions that Dogen goes on to describe are about social relations, as are many of the precepts. Most of the precepts, the 16 Bodhisattva precepts, strongly relate to speech and relationships, connections that we have, that we build. If we're unskillful, we might break connections that we have to others. And here's a couple more. 4 ways bodhisattvas embrace living beings, or the bodhisattva's 4 embracing actions. This is getting like kind of intimate, like embracing. There's different meanings to embrace. One of them is to like give a hug. That might be a bodhisattva action, but it's probably doesn't quite capture it. But there's another definition that I dug up, was that to embrace is to accept or support willingly and enthusiastically. And that seems much more in the spirit of this translation. The bodhisattva's 4 embracing actions, willingly and enthusiastically supporting others in the world. And then finally, there's one that goes, 4 dimensions of a living bodhisattva spirit. And so again, spirit has a number of different meanings. One of them is a supernatural being. And in Zen Buddhism, we don't dwell very much on supernatural beings, and we do talk about hungry ghosts and things, but it's not like we live in a practice realm which is consciously, dealing with supernatural beings. It's more like us here, living beings. So this spirit, though, also has a definition of, it has to do with Bodhisattva spirit. The spirit can be, if someone's spirited, it could be energetic, having a lot of positive intention and determination. Sort of like Jizo Bodhisattva, boundless and optimism, endless energy for saving other beings. And this term about spirit brings to mind for me those lines from Shanti Deva's Way of the Bodhisattva, which we chant from time to time, and it includes, I do adopt the spirit of enlightenment and will follow the way of the Bodhisattva. So, different translations. Each translator was doing their best to use English words that they felt successfully captured what they believed was Dogen's intention. But they give alternate perspectives, whether it's guidance or action or embracing support. There are different perspectives on this idea of what bodhisattvas do. And these different perspectives are is an important part of creativity in Dharma practice. And it occurred to me, these different perspectives, it's kind of like a Cubist painting by Picasso or George Braque, that shows 3 different sides of a woman's face and ears all in the same picture. Different perspectives. And they illuminate different understandings of what Dogen was teaching, which we can only trust in the translations that we read to gain any access into Dogen's meaning, since most of us don't read Japanese or ancient Chinese. And looking at different interpretations of a same set of words or description, that's also kind of like koan practice. Koans have 4 or 8 or 10 lines, maybe pretty limited number of lines. They're often baffling, irrational, but they have served over the centuries as tools to access deeper insights. And there's no one answer to any koan. They provide perspectives. One day they might provide one perspective, and then the next day, under different circumstances, they might provide a whole nother perspective. And that's kind of like some experiences that I've had, and I've heard others having, about seeing new meaning in the words of familiar old chants. We chant various chants that we might have chanted dozens of times. Meanwhile, having life experiences and concern with a certain aspect of my life, when I read the chant the chant again, it has really different meaning that I never saw before. So whatever the 4 things the Bodhisattvas are doing, I wanted to talk about the term Bodhisattva. Robert Aitken, who is on our founder's wall out there, was one of Mushin's early teachers in her practice life. He's written some books, you may know. He's defined Bodhisattva as one who forgets the self in working with others. Forgets the self. Of course, this brings to mind a line from Dogen's Genjo koan. To study the Buddha way is to study the self, and to study the self is to forget the self. Maybe the process of doing that is a step in the Bodhisattva path. Of course, we can easily think of archetypal bodhisattvas like Manjushri Bodhisattva, the Bodhisattva of great wisdom, or Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, the Bodhisattva of great compassion. She greets us as we come in the door here. Or Samantabhadra Bodhisattva, the Bodhisattva of great enlightening activity. But Dogen's essay has been described by one of the editors of one of the Shobo Genzo editions. His essay's been described as explaining the virtues common to lay and ordained practitioners in all Buddhist schools. Dogen wasn't writing about archetypal, mythological, perhaps, figures. He was writing about practitioners like us. He was writing about bodhisattvas like us. Not that we all perform these beneficial actions that I'm going to be describing in a minute all the time, but we orient ourselves in that direction. We lean towards beneficial action for ourselves and others. We lean in the direction of the four great bodhisattva vows, which are impossible to completely accomplish, of course. Our practice evolves. It evolves over time. And that evolution is a result of creativity, change, inclusion of new perspectives, new insights, new experiences, being added to our practice as it flourishes, deepens, settles. Dogen wrote this fascicle called Bodhisattva's Four Methods of Guidance in the year 1243. He didn't write it as a Dharma talk like many of the other fascicles in the Shobogenzo, but he wrote it, they think he wrote it for his primary benefactor, and his name was Lord Yoshishige Hatanao of Kyoto. That was his primary benefactor, and Kyoto was the capital of Japan at that time. In that year, 1243, Yoshige sponsored the construction of Dogen's new monastery, known as Eiheiji, which means eternal peace. It was located in a remote part of northern Japan. He wanted to get away from these centers of politics and intrigue, and he wanted to get out where he and his monastic companions could concentrate on Dharma practice and not be drawn into politics, basically. He lived and taught there for the rest of his relatively short life. Another 10 years he lived, and he died in 1253 at the age of 53. He did a lot in his lifetime, short lifetime. So Dogen's four methods of Bodhisattva guidance are unconditional giving, kind speech, beneficial action, and something that's translated as identity action. which I'll get to. So unconditional giving is giving, or dana, without expecting anything in return. It's spontaneous and natural generosity. Just emerges when one sees a need, one has an urge to give. It could be giving to a food bank, as we have a drive to do that here. Could be giving clothes or blankets to a shelter. Could give money to a charity. You're moved by an appeal and you give. It could be offering words of encouragement or support, giving support to a friend or a family or a stranger. It could be giving your full attention to someone who really needs to get something off their chest, who really has something they need to say out loud, and you can just be there giving them your attention, listening. And there's myriad other acts of spontaneous giving that are available in our lives. Dogen says in his essay that giving subtly connects the giver and receiver. Builds a bridge, it builds a bond between two people. Whether it's listening, whether it's material aid, whether it's kind words. He also says that we just need to give according to what we have, what we can give. And he says that no gift is too small, so small, that it doesn't plant a seed of benefit for now and the future. Just the very act of giving plants a seed of benefit for the receiver and the giver. He says, thus people of goodwill are naturally always mindful of opportunities to give. And they use the life that they've been given to benefit other people. And in this spirit, Dogen writes that even making a living and producing things can be nothing other than giving. Can be nothing other than giving. The second of the Bodhisattva methods of guidance is kind speech. Kind speech, which arises from a kind mind. Dogen tells us that a kind mind that arises from a compassionate heart. This is thoroughgoing, integrated practice. Compassion, kind mind, kind speech. Weaving together our practice in creative ways. He says that encountering others, words of loving care are offered, like the words that a parent says to their child. When someone hears kind speech, it gladdens their heart. I'm sure we've all had that experience. Someone says something kind to you, and it's like, you know, I'm kind of a sucker for movies, you know. When something kind happens in a movie, gosh, it brings tears to my eyes, you know. And he says the more that one practices kind speech, the more it becomes part of one's own life. Kind of like mindfulness, you know, kind of like Zazen every day. Kind speech. It grows. And also, he says, kind speech is a skillful means. It's not just loving kindness, it's also a skillful means to resolve misunderstandings and conflicts. And he ends his section on kind speech by saying that kind speech is not just praising the merits of others. It has the power to turn the destiny of the nation. You know? And there are historical figures in the 20th century who did change the destiny of the nation through their speech, their kind, nonviolent speech. Dogen's third method of Bodhisattva guidance is beneficial action. It's using skillful means to help others. Whether they're rich or poor, prominent or humble. Things like building tiny homes for the unhoused, volunteering in a hospice. This would be contemporary beneficial action. Helping people that are at risk of being arrested and deported. Or protecting natural areas for future generations. These are all beneficial actions that people do. There are people doing all of these things because they're moved to do that. Their heart tells them, this must be done. And Dogen emphasizes that doing such beneficial actions, contrary to what some might think, does not deplete one's own resources, but rather it enriches one's life as well as the life of those who benefit from these actions. This is like the phrase from the 5 remembrances that some of us Silver Dragons chanted yesterday at the end of our practice day. I am the beneficiary of my deeds. My deeds are my closest companion. My deeds are the ground on which I stand. This is beneficial action. He says beneficial action are acts of oneness. Not two, but one. Thus, he says, act for the benefit of all, for friends as well as for those that are hostile, which is difficult. Fortunately, we have metta practice to help us open our hearts to those we're in conflict with or have judgment about. To open our heart of compassion for everyone. Everyone is suffering. Maybe especially those that we're in conflict with or disapprove of. So the fourth method is called identity action, and it means acting with no thought of a difference between oneself and the other. Identity. We identify with them. We don't see them as different and separate and have judgment about them. Although the relationships of self and other are constantly changing with changing circumstances and causes and conditions, essentially we're not different. Buddha nature pervades all of us. At our core, we're the same. He says, when identity action is fully realized, self and others are the same. Dogen writes, this being so, identity action is a vow of bodhisattvas with a gentle expression, he says. Practice identity action for all people. I love that. I think of the Japanese Zen people as being really stern and, like samurai, but Dogen urges us to have a gentle expression. Practice generosity to others. Dogen ends by pointing out that all 4 of these, giving, kind speech, beneficial action, and identity action, are contained within one another. So you have it's like this matrix of 16 different ways of doing beneficial action. Everything, all of these aspects are included. So that's a lot of opportunity for practice. Varied practice, creative practice, right? Individualized practice. And these ways of beneficial action are inherent in people. This is not something that gets planted when you start doing Dharma practice and it grows because of your Dharma practice. It's part of the inherent Buddha nature that we all have. And it's acting within us all in varying degrees. Sometimes subtly, very subtly, sometimes more overt and intentional. And it's acting not only in Buddhists, of course, but in all people. All people of goodwill around the world and at all times have practiced these acts of generosity and kindness for the benefit of others. We're all unique. We're all different. Even though we're all the same, we're also all different and unique. Some are younger. Some of us are older. Some of us are new to practice, and some have been practicing for some years. Some of us have had life experiences that incline us towards generosity and benevolence to others. And some of us have had life experiences which cause us to hold back and obstruct our generosity, our inherent Buddha nature. And as practice continues, as our years of practice add up, we become more familiar with Bodhisattva actions. So you might consider taking up a practice of noticing when these actions arise, either in yourself or in others. You might be at the grocery store and someone, gives you a smile and says a kind word to you. It's like, wow, there's bodhisattvas everywhere. You can be mindful of, in all the different circumstances of your life, busy or relaxed, with people or solitary, is bodhisattva action happening? And if you practice noticing these, they'll become more and more alive in your life. These beneficial actions. And you'll be part of helping to keep wisdom and compassion alive in our troubled world. By your actions, by your bodhisattva actions. Right where you are. So in closing, here's a line I noticed yesterday morning in the Saturday Golden Hour dedication that resonated with me for this topic. May we awaken in order to work ceaselessly for the liberation of all beings.
Please turn to page 5.